The afternoon sun had long since retreated, replaced by a biting autumn chill as I, Emily Carter, finally finished my grueling shift at the local diner. In the small, quiet town of Willow Creek, the late fall air doesn't just blow. It seems to seep directly into your bones, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. By the time I managed to lock up the diner, clutch my purse tight against the wind, and trek toward my car, my mind was fixed on a single goal: a warm blanket, a steaming cup of tea, and the absolute silence of a house where I lived alone. Lately, life had felt like a series of heavy anchors, endless work, mounting bills, and that specific, hollow loneliness that comes from living in a home that feels far too large for one person. The drive home was a blur of orange leaves dancing in my headlights, crunching beneath my tires like a metronome for my thoughts. I found myself humming a soft, nameless tune to the radio, one of those subconscious habits you only notice when the engine finally cuts out and the silence rushes back in. As I turned onto my street, the neighborhood was a graveyard of dark windows and still porches. My own porch light glowed in the distance, a small, amber beacon that usually promised safety. But that night, as I approached, the light revealed something that made my breath catch in my throat. There was a silhouette sitting on my front steps. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, and I tightened my grip on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. In Willow Creek, you don't often find strangers loitering on doorsteps at midnight. As I pulled into the driveway, the headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the figure. It was a man, likely in his mid-20s, with a mop of messy brown hair and a jacket that had seen better days. He didn't look like a threat. He looked like a person who had simply run out of options. He sat with his head bowed and his hands clasped tightly, as if he were trying to physically hold onto whatever warmth he had left. Still, instinct screamed at me to be careful. I cracked the car door just an inch, my thumb hovering over the panic alarm on my key fob. "Can I help you with something?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly in the stagnant night air. The man looked up, his eyes weary but surprisingly gentle. He stood up quickly, raising his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "I am so sorry," he said, his voice raspy from the cold. "I didn't mean to alarm you. My name is Ryan. My car broke down a few miles back on the highway, and I've been walking for what feels like hours. I was just searching for a house with a light on. Yours was the only one." I studied him through the darkness, my mind running through a dozen worst-case scenarios. But there was a sincere awkwardness in the way he stood, an awareness of how suspicious he looked, that softened my fear. He didn't sound like a predator. He sounded like someone who was utterly exhausted and lost. "I tried to call for help," he added, "but my phone died miles ago. I'm sorry to bother you." The logical thing, the safer thing, would have been to tell him to keep walking or offer to call a tow truck while I stayed safely behind a locked door. But a strange tug of compassion, or perhaps a reflection of my own loneliness, took hold of me. I thought about how I would want to be treated if I was stranded in the freezing dark. "Look," I said, surprising myself with my own boldness. "It's freezing out here. I have a couch. You can crash there for the night if you want." Ryan's eyes widened, a look of pure, unfiltered relief washing over his face. "Are you sure? I really don't want to impose." "You'll freeze if you don't," I replied firmly. "Come on." I unlocked the door, and as Ryan stepped inside, I noticed how carefully he wiped his boots, as if he were entering a temple. I kept a wary eye on him as I grabbed a spare blanket from the hall closet. He didn't prowl or peer around. He stood politely in the center of the room, almost afraid to disturb the air. "The bathroom is down the hall," I told him, tossing the blanket onto the sofa. Don't make me regret this." He gave me a small, sheepish smile. "You won't." "Thank you." Really? I retreated to my room and locked my door, my heart still racing. I expected to stay awake all night, listening for the sound of a window breaking or a cabinet opening. But when the morning light finally spilled across my floor, I realized I had slept soundly. The house was quiet, save for the faint, steady rhythm of breathing from the living room. I stood in the doorway and watched him for a moment. Under the blanket, Ryan looked incredibly vulnerable. All my remaining suspicion melted into genuine sympathy. I went to the kitchen and began to brew coffee, the rich aroma filling the house. Soon, Ryan stirred. He sat up groggy, running a hand through his tangled hair. "Sorry," he muttered. "I'll get out of your way now." "Sit," I insisted. "Have some coffee." We sat at the small kitchen table, two total strangers sharing a quiet morning. That was when the layers began to peel back. Ryan told me he was traveling across state lines, chasing the hope of a construction job in the city. He spoke about his father, who had taught him how to build things with his own two hands, and his dream of finally making something of his life. There was an honesty in his voice, a lack of agenda that was refreshing. What I thought would be a few hours turned into a few days. The local mechanic couldn't get to his car until Monday, so I offered him the couch again. And in that time, Ryan stopped being a stranger. He carried my groceries without being asked. He fixed a creaky kitchen cabinet that had been annoying me for months. He made me laugh at things I hadn't found funny in years. Between the ordinary conversations and the small, unexpected kindnesses, something shifted deep inside me. I had invited him in out of a sense of duty, but I never expected him to fill the silence of my home so completely. He listened to me talk about my long shifts at the diner and the way I often felt invisible to the world. He truly listened. What started as a single night of shelter turned into a bond that reshaped my world. Sometimes, the people who enter our lives by pure chance are the ones who remind us what it means to connect, to trust, and to be seen. I had opened my door to let a stranger sleep on the couch, but in doing so, I had opened my heart to the possibility of something much deeper. It all started with a simple act of opening the door.